Hey guys, I want to talk right now about what I think are 5 of the absolute most worthless bits of advice that we get as women physicians. There was a thread separately that caught my eye yesterday or today about sort of, tell me the worst piece of career advice that you've gotten. And hundreds of comments, it wasn't my post, hundreds of comments, women physicians sharing the kind of career advice that they've gotten. And a lot of it sounded really familiar, and you can probably relate. I mean, I remember talking to a leadership when I was sort of struggling for the right balance of wanting to do more of this and less of that. And I remember him saying to me, if my kids see me before 6 p.m., they think it's a special occasion, and that's just the way it is. So I want to start this conversation by remembering your conversations with your mentors and your sponsors and anybody else is not about their career, it's about yours. And so I just thought to myself, well, just because you have lived this way your whole life and you'll likely retire this way, does not mean that's what I want for my career. And that's not the problem that we're here to solve right now, right? We're here to solve a different problem, which is in my career. So, and while that is, of course, directly related to my leadership's wants and needs for the department, it was really, really striking to me because that was a big non-solution. Anyway, number 1 is we get told you've got to speak up. Well, of course you have to speak up, and everybody knows that, and everyone goes through a period of time where you kind of feel a little bit unsure when you're new somewhere, or if you're having a little bit of imposter syndrome, just lower self-confidence, or whatever the case. A lot of people have some timidness around speaking up, but we all know that we need to speak up. The problem that we have is we're usually not prepared to speak up. So you can imagine, I'm sure, or you can even recall a time in your life that you had a conversation in the hallway or the stairs, somewhere that wasn't pre-planned, where if the right words had come out of your mouth at that time, whether it was to sort of put yourself forward or to defend an idea or whatever the case, if the right words had come out, you would have had a different outcome. But instead, you couldn't think of what to say. The opportunity was missed, and while you were walking away, you had that like head slap moment. I should have said this instead, right? And that happens to all of us. So yes, learning to speak up, but when the moment is gone, the moment is gone, or at least it feels like it's gone. And that's where I think our mentors and our advisors fall flat in helping us. So yeah, we need to learn to speak up, but we need to learn a couple of things beyond that. We need to learn, number 1, with some forethought, what kinds of things we might want to be speaking up about. What are the things we need to advocate for? Specifically, like where do we want to be going in our careers, and what do we have that suits us for that? So in a way, it's that professional branding or that message mapping that needs to be thought out in advance for a variety of scenarios, so that when you get those opportunities, what comes out is the right thing. And beyond that as well, there are ways to get a second chance, right? There are ways to follow back up. So even though you're walking down the hallway thinking, I should have said this, I should have said that, in most cases, there are ways to have a do-over, but we don't get taught this. So that, I think, is a big fail. You've got to speak up. Yes, everybody knows that. It's not great advice because it's not that helpful. The second one is always negotiate. Yes, of course, everybody knows we're supposed to negotiate, but we aren't really taught how to negotiate. We know that women are less likely to negotiate, less likely because we don't know how, or we don't know what to ask for, and we're kind of confused about whether or not negotiating and asking are the same thing, and they are not. But the main thing is, again, I think part of this is around communication, right? Knowing how to effectively convey what you have as a win for the person who has the power to give it to you, right? Because then they will. So that's a really important skill to have, to know how to do that. And the other thing around negotiation is you've got to know basically the industry. So depending upon what it is that you are negotiating for, or the environment, you have to know what's actually on the table. There are going to be some things that your boss or whomever it is that's holding the cards you're negotiating with simply cannot change. They may have boundaries on, in terms of the amount of time or the amount of money or the amount of whatever that they can give you. So some things that you may ask for, they may simply not be able to give you. That's worth knowing because you don't want to spend a lot of time or, sort of personal capital on that. But you do want to know what things are actually negotiable so that you can identify which of those is most important to you and set out a plan before your negotiation conversation so that those words come out right. So that to me is what's most important and what's missing about, negotiate. Because negotiating for the sake of negotiating does not help you. I mean, if anything, women are perceived, unfortunately, even today, women are perceived in sort of more of a negative light if they do speak up or if they do negotiate. So I'm not saying don't do these things. You should. I have, and I have successfully, and I have in ways that haven't worked out. But one thing I know for sure is you should be mindful of the opportunities that you take and make sure that you're prepared so that they go really well. All right, number 3, learn to prioritize. I mean, this is almost one of the most insulting things you can say to somebody who has too much to do. How do you decide what to do when there's too much to do, especially in an environment in which you feel like it's not up to you to say what you're going to do, or that you must say yes to everything that's asked of you? You know, I have the experience now of having been in academics and having been in private industry. And I've got to tell you, it is remarkably different across those two sort of spectrum of what the expectation is, that, you know, there is a huge amount of work that's going to get done, or there's a certain amount of time and effort and you're going to prioritize and do what's most important. So people don't need to learn to prioritize, so to speak. What they need to do actually is take a step back, because there's a lot of systems, organizational systems and things, and some will work better for others. That's not what really prioritization is about. It's about getting in touch with your values. And a lot of people don't actually know what their values are. And you're probably sitting here thinking, yes, of course I know what my values are. But when you really dig into it, and there are some great books and resources on this, most people fall into one of two camps. They either can't discriminate among the values, right? So they value everything, you know, so they value stability and they also value adventure. And not that those are mutually exclusive, but, you know, you can kind of see how those aren't quite the same. Or they find that they are not living their values. So they value dependability and they're super dependable at work, but maybe not dependable for their kids or their partner, or, you know, some other kind of related thing. So once you dig in and really figure out what your true values are, then you can figure out what to prioritize, because you can see how your activities line up with your stated priorities, or whether maybe they don't. And then you can figure out what should be the priority. And now you might say, well, maybe your boss's priority is different from your priority. And so that's true. And, you know, in the worst case scenario, then maybe you are in the wrong job. And it doesn't mean that you're in the wrong field. Maybe you're just in the wrong place, in the wrong capacity, or maybe you just haven't had the right conversation yet. But I don't think most people are really at that dire of a level. I think that people just haven't taken the time and the space to back it on up, really dig in and figure out what their priorities are based on what their true values are, what they value the most, not what they value like, yes, I endorse that, that's a good thing. Everybody values honesty. But what about honesty to the point where it's hurtful to somebody? If it's not an important thing to be honest about, you know, some people would say, oh, well, you tell a white lie to preserve somebody's feelings. And because you care about that type of thing, right? You care about relationships, you care about somebody's, you know, what's the word for someone else feeling good? You care about that. So we can't value all of these things equally. I have a really great list that, again, is not mine, I didn't write down, of about 50 values, and they all sound super. So if you go at them one by one, you'd say, yeah, definitely. But we have to rank order these things because, as many people have heard, right, there's a priority, not priorities. We don't live that way today, but it's okay to say, I've got 3 priorities, but you can't have 50 priorities. And so you can have a top set of values and you can like other values, but you cannot value them all equally, and you don't. So you've got to get in touch with that. You've got to identify it, and then you've got to explicitly map it to what you're doing, and then you can prioritize. And you can do it however you want, with whatever kind of journal system or you know, electronic app, whatever you do. That's just more of a facilitator, a tool, and it's not going to work the best until you dig into those values. Okay, number 4, set boundaries. Yes, total no-brainer, set boundaries. But what does that mean and how do we do it? I mean, for one thing, if you are not brand new on the scene somewhere, and so you've been living and working in a certain way, how do you suddenly institute some boundaries? And how do you do that while you're still preserving your relationships with your family, with your coworkers, with your boss, and you're still preserving your status as a contributing member, right? You don't want to ruin your relationships or your reputation, but you do want and you do deserve boundaries. So this is, again, where implementation is so much more important than just saying, create some boundaries. You know, really teaching someone the specific tools to go about how to articulate, how to achieve boundaries, and also the kinds of behavioral cues that we can give people to not only establish boundaries, but the self-sabotaging behavioral things that we do that erode the boundaries that we think we have set. So that's really so much more important to teach somebody than just to set boundaries. So there again, I think we make, that's a worthless piece of advice if it doesn't come with what's next. And then the fifth one, I think, is find a sponsor, right? We're all told, find a sponsor. You need a sponsor to help you get some of the best opportunities. And as most people know, right, the difference between the mentor and the sponsors, the mentor gives you the advice. The sponsor actually spends their professional capital, right, their reputational capital by giving you an opportunity, and then you deliver. So it's not a charity handout. It's the sponsor. It's a win-win-win. The sponsor wins because they delivered the right talent for the job. That's you. You win because you get the visibility and the opportunity to do something, right, that moves you ahead. So it's win. And the organization wins because you've done a good job. So it's win-win-win. It's definitely not charity. The problem, though, that many women express is they don't know how to find the sponsor. So if you don't know how to find the sponsor, then all of this is totally irrelevant. And another thing that I've really learned in business is that there are many, many ways that are simple and deliberate and could be instituted right now in your life to help you to find sponsors. There are a lot of different ways to go about finding the right sponsor. And some of them are simple, sort of person to person, almost kind of cold calls where you just, but done in the right way, where you align somebody's motivations and interests with your skill set and ask for a meeting. I mean, this is not a hard thing to do. This is something that's done sort of routinely where I work now as a matter of professional development. At least once a week, it's an expectation that you have sort of a one-on-one meeting with somebody that you don't already know explicitly for this purpose. That's a professional development. It's really great. So there's that. But the other thing is now we have the internet, right? So you have your website, or you have your Facebook page, or your LinkedIn profile, or your Doximity, or your ResearchGate, or all of the above, whatever it is that you have online, where you can be essentially setting yourself up to be a magnet for opportunity, so that sponsors and opportunity holders, the people who have stuff that needs to get done, will find you, and the opportunities will come to you, which is so much more better. It's so much better than having to seek out opportunities with so much effort. Of course, you still need mentors, you still need sponsors, and you should still be proactive in doing that. But I just want to let you know that there are an amazing untapped amount of digital strategy now that you can use to position yourself for those opportunities, to be found for those opportunities, to have more professional visibility for those opportunities. So those, I think, are the 5 most worthless career advice tips if they don't come with implementation. One of the reasons that we teach the solves for this, right, the implementation steps for this at the Transformed Retreat, is because these things are all incredibly important. But as you can see, at least if you agree with what I've just said, there are many, many layers deep, right? They're not as superficial as, well, just go ahead and speak up, find yourself a sponsor, make sure you negotiate. That's just not helpful. And even if you go one layer deep and you say, okay, well, here's how a negotiation works. For example, if you were to get into anchoring, right, and the sort of strategy behind who offers what first, right, who goes first in the negotiations, you can counter negotiate. And, do you come in close to what you want, or do you deliberately kind of shoot up so you can negotiate down? Like, those are strategic things that it's worth knowing, right? It's very much worth knowing before you find yourself in a negotiation situation, especially because you're very likely to be much less experienced in negotiation than the person you are negotiating with. So it's important. It is important to get the message that we should negotiate. It's important to go further than that and understand what effective negotiation looks like. But way, 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 way more important than any of that is really the deeper digging, right? The coming down and understanding with some forethought what it is that you want, like really and strategically and deliberately, because you only get a few chances, right, to do this. What it is that you want, how to articulate it, making sure that it is based on those core values that you've uncovered. So no matter how you go about doing this, I really encourage you, whether you're going to come to a retreat, and it could be my retreat, right? It could be Transformed, or it could be one of the other ones I'm seeing a lot these days. Whichever one seems right for you, or even if you're going to do it on your own, just take these couple things to heart and realize these are 5 really important areas, but they are sort of worthless as standard.